perspective, how potential the collaboration between Indonesia and Australia to become the main actor for EV batteries, as we know that China and also South America has still dominating the supply chain in the global?
Well, it depends where you're looking at, right? So there's certain aspects of the battery that you've seen there that is dominated by certain countries. And it all just depends on whether we do more prospecting, whether we find more minerals that are sufficient to be battery grade. I think also a lot of the users, the end companies, so the electric vehicle companies, even the energy storage companies are looking for, and the cell manufacturers are looking to diversify their inputs, their supply chain, so that they're not as worried about the shocks, the global shocks, the global supply chain issues. So supply chain is a massive consideration, and so Australia, Indonesia presents an alternative opportunity for for manufacturers to diversify their supply chains. And if they do that, what we have to do as countries is we have to actually start to think about, well, we do present this opportunity to the cell manufacturers or some manufacturers of electric vehicles. Can you then say, well, we do provide this diversity, can we actually then get a little bit more of the value chain here in Australia and in Indonesia? And maybe we should do it in a way that we do it in a partnership, so that, we can say, well, look, you can get a lot of the resources from Australia, a lot of the resources from Indonesia, and do cell manufacturing in Indonesia, or you do part of the cell manufacturing in Australia, which is for our climate, for example, the hot climate batteries in Australia, and you do the rest of it in Indonesia, or you do some variation like that. So there is various models out there, various opportunities to collaborate and to actually grow the battery sectors, both in Australia and Indonesia, and also to develop the next generation of batteries, right? What's going to be the next thing after lithium-ion batteries that we use in our electric vehicles?
Mm-hmm. To be precise, Mr. Neeraj, what kind of electronic vehicle battery does the market need at this moment? And could it possible for this collaboration, especially for Indonesia, to fulfill the needs of market?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. So if you asked me this about 4 years ago, the cell of choice for a large fraction of electric vehicles was graphite with what's called NMC or NCA, so nickel, cobalt. A lot of the more affordable electric vehicles are now using graphite with lithium iron phosphate or some variant of that, right? So it just depends on what is required. So I guess taking a step back, should we be building in Indonesia and in Australia the cells for our domestic use, right? So should we actually be building cells that we can just use domestically? And that's a big market in itself, right? Indonesia and Australia, they're quite big markets. And so maybe we should be looking at building cells for our own internal use, right? And then thinking about exporting. So taking it step by step, building the industry up, and then going from there. Now, if that makes sense, I mean, there's an opportunity to grow cells in Australia, in Indonesia, in-country cell manufacture, and whether you go down the path of what's already proven technology, or whether you start to think about new technology that you put into your cells, is a strategic or a business decision, I guess.
Okay.
A lot of the things we're seeing at the moment is that technology that is developed overseas is being brought to Australia and potentially being used as the cell manufacturing.
Okay.
Right? So they're actually so they're manufacturing cells overseas, and then they're just replicating that technology here. A bit like Tesla with its Shanghai factory and the Germany factory, Berlin factory, same sort of idea, but similar sort of companies are trying to do that across the world. And I believe Indonesia also has had some interest in some companies come to them to Indonesia to set up their operations for cell manufacturing.
Yeah. And recently, Australia has launched a national EV strategy consolidation paper. Could you please explain to us what is it about and how is the progress this far?
Yes, so we have been the government has been going through various papers, strategy papers, trying to understand where the holes are, trying to understand how we as Australians can leverage this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of making cells of being part of this lithium battery landscape. And so we did the critical minerals strategy a year or so ago, and that was looking at how we, as I said before, how we get more value to Australia in this critical mineral sector. What minerals do we have? How does those minerals fit into the battery value chain, and how we can go up the value chain? The consultation paper now is called the National Battery Strategy. So it's not the EV strategy, it's the battery strategy. And it's looking at basically trying to manufacture cells and batteries in Australia and trying to understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, where we can go, and how we can sort of grow as a country and take a little bit more of the cell manufacturing here in Australia, a little bit of the battery manufacturing in Australia. Oh, well, this is my opinion. This is what I think the government wants to do, but it might just be looking at what the government sees as advantages, disadvantages, and how we go about that. Now, the battery strategy, I believe, is all-encompassing, so it's not just lithium-ion batteries. It does look at flow batteries, it does look at lead-acid batteries, but it's trying to get a global picture to see where the government will then invest its funding, its leveraging to grow the Australian economy in the battery space.
Okay, we would also like to know
that's
about.
Still open.
Yeah.
That's still open. That's still open from consultation, and so that will be finished up in the first week of March. Then the government will develop its policies around that.
Yeah, we would also like to know about the investment from Tesla in Australia. Is it any new updates?
I'm probably not the right person to talk to for this. You probably need to talk to Tesla for this. But I don't know, honestly. But I'm sure I'm sure there's some happenings. There's some batteries being developed or batteries being bought to go to the grid.
Okay. Okay, the last question, Mr. Neeraj. Speaking about the future, is it possible with the strength that comes from both companies, from both countries, is it possible for both countries to build another collaborations in terms of electronic vehicles other than batteries?
So I think so. I think there's an opportunity to develop more than just the cells and the battery packs. There's an opportunity to develop the vehicles that go around it. So buses, trucks, cars, yes, definitely. The integration systems, the way it's distributed along the grid, the communication between various vehicles / energy storage, right, units. And so there might be also battery-based energy storage and trying to put that into the grid. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And, whether we sort of start thinking about potentially having, connectivity between the two countries in terms of the electricity market, right? Do we actually have the opportunity to share electricity across, right? So use the solar energy available in Australia, link it up with Indonesia's electricity grid, and things like this. So there was some big projects that were thinking about doing that. Sort of linking in a big solar farm in Australia with electric cable basically to Singapore, trying to sort of provide energy for Singapore via solar power. Something similar could be done for Indonesia, but also how do you store that power, right? There might be some opportunities to have shared storage facilities, things like this.
Yeah.